Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to our first ever 50-50 Women on Boards closing celebration today. I'm Betsy Berkemer-Creder, the CEO of 50-50 Women on Boards, and I am joined by Stephanie Sonnabend and Mally Giro, who are the co-founders of our great campaign.
Thank you. Hi, Betsy.
Good to see you. This is our big day, Mally.
Yep. Well, I'm Mally Giro, and we are delighted to have you here today to celebrate the culmination of our 30 conversations on board diversity held over the past 2 weeks in cities across the U.S. and internationally in Greece, Canada, Mexico, Spain, and the U.K. These events are part of our advocacy efforts to bring awareness to the business imperative of diverse and gender-balanced boards.
As you all know, we kicked off the events with our global conversation on board diversity on November 3rd, highlighting CEOs and board directors leading the way to diverse and gender-balanced boards. We also shared the progress made by women internationally to secure board positions. And if you haven't seen the global conversation broadcast, by all means, I suggest you listen to it. As you heard at all our events, we report on the progress of women on boards of the Russell 3000 companies, with data provided to us by our partner Equilar. And this week, we just received the third quarter data. And I'm happy to report that as of September 30th, 2021, women now hold 26.1% of the Russell 3000 corporate board seats. This is a 0.5 percentage point increase just in the last quarter alone. At the end of Q2, we reported that the percentage was 25.6% of the board seats.
You know, that is amazing. Great news.
26%. Women have never held that many board seats.
No, and it's just going to get better and better.
Exactly.
Yeah. Great acceleration of progress. It's great to see.
So following the global conversation, we heard from nearly 150 VIP panelists about their board journeys and their expert advice to both women and men looking to pursue a board position or serve as an ally to others. Additionally, more than 250 director coaches led breakout sessions with our attendees to help coach your efforts to serve on a board. This all could not have been possible without the support of our 60-plus chairs who secured more than 240 sponsorships and attracted nearly 6,000 registrants. So please join me in giving them a round of applause. Great job.
We thank you all.
Mm-hmm. We also want to thank the 50-50 Women on Boards team who orchestrated all the creative and technical production. It truly takes the work of many to make an impact and bring awareness to advancing gender balance and diversity on boards. I want to give a special shout out to Heather Spilsbury, COO, who you will see in a minute. She managed the team and pulled off 30 events in just a couple of weeks. And also to Brianna Baki, who is our VP of Finance. So let's give it another round of applause to all of our team.
Great team.
Thank you all.
Thank you. And thank you, Stephanie and Mally, for your leadership since 2010 when you started the campaign. You have been driving the movement and inspiring us all to build momentum for the effort to get more women on corporate boards.
Thank you. Thank you, Betsy.
Thank you, Betsy, and happy Thanksgiving.
Wonderful. So good to be working with you too. Now that you all have had a chance to be part of the 30 conversations and networking sessions, we want to bring you the next 45 minutes to answer your questions about your personal journey to corporate boards. To moderate the discussion, please welcome Heather Spilsbury, our Chief Operating Officer and CMO. Welcome, Heather.
Welcome. Thanks, Betsy. I'm delighted to be here with you today, and I'm so honored to partner with you every day at 50-50 Women on Boards. Before we get started and we bring in our esteemed panelists, I just wanted to let you guys know how today's conversation is going to run. So earlier this week, we had asked everyone to submit their questions to info@5050 Women on Boards. From those submissions, we pulled several questions for our panelists this afternoon. And throughout the conversation, we also invite you to engage in the chat and post your questions, and those will be fed to us in real time. While we won't be able to get to all of the questions, don't worry. We plan on posting those questions on our LinkedIn group page at 50/50 Women on Boards, and we also plan on posting them in the News Hub on our website. After the panel session concludes, we'll provide additional details for how to get involved and stay connected. So with that, let's bring out our panelists to the stage. Please join me in welcoming Anna Kahn. Anna is the board director of CVB Financial Corp and chair of California Manufacturing Technology Consulting. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you. Hi, Heather.
Hi. We also have Veda Manager. Veda is the president and CEO of Manager Global Consulting Group. He also serves on the boards of Valvoline and Helios Education Foundation. Hi, Veda.
Great to be here, Heather. Thanks so much for the invite.
Good to have you. We have Esther Aguilera. Esther is a friend and partner of 50/50 Women on Boards. She is the president and CEO of Latino Corporate Directors Association, and she also serves on the Diversity Advisory Council for 50/50 Women on Boards. We also have Julie Hill.
So great
who is a
to be
longtime
here.
friend.
Thank you.
Oh, nice to have you, Esther. Thanks for being here with us. We also have Julie Hill. She is a longtime friend and supporter of 50/50 Women on Boards. She's also a 50/50 Women on Boards board director, and she's the director of the Lord Abbott Family of Funds. She's the chair of UC Irvine Board of Trustees, and she's retired from the Anthem board. Welcome, everyone. It's
Hi,
great
Heather.
to have you here. Hello.
Hi, everybody.
So before we dive in, I just wanted to ask you all one question, and then we'll get into the audience questions. But this came up a few times when we received the questions earlier this week. So for each of you, why don't you share a little bit about how you attained your first board position?
Well, I'll start.
Oh, go ahead,
okay.
Veda. Go ahead.
Okay,
Go ahead.
The man shouldn't start first. Let me defer to the ladies.
We're cool. You go ahead.
Okay, very good. All right. So actually, my first board seat came through a total mistake. And when I say mistake, it was by virtue of the fact that a business partner came to Nike where I was at time an executive and wanted to do a partnership with us. Unbeknownst to me, he was retiring and aging out of a board that he was on, Ashland Inc. And although the transaction, we presented a great meeting, we had good exchange of financials, all the metrics looked good, the deal didn't eventually go through. But he was watching how the meeting happened, who the attendees were, et cetera. And he went back, unbeknownst to me, to his board and said, hey, I didn't do business with Nike. I had no prior relationship with this guy. I'm leaving the board. I was impressed by his knowledge of the financials and how he put this meeting together. I think you ought to put him on the board when I retire. And so I guess I say that to say you never know who's watching. And even in a failed transaction, something that I didn't do to enrich him or the deal didn't go through, it still resulted in a board seat for me. And now that was in 2008. And here it is 2021. I'm still on this board and also IPO'd another board. So I guess the lesson here is that always stay sharp and always never know who's watching.
It's a great point. Anna?
Yeah, I had the opportunity to join the CMTC board. That was my first board assignment. And CMTC is California's advocate and go-to center for all things manufacturing. And coming from a manufacturing background, I'm passionate about the mission of small business and the role of manufacturing playing in our society. And so the marriage of something that you're really passionate about is a great way to enter into a nonprofit board as your first experience. And from getting my feet wet in the CMTC board and the work there, somebody actually found me on LinkedIn for my first corporate public board from there. And so, all roads lead to different things. And to Vada's point, you never know who's watching, you never know who's out there looking. And as long as you continue to bring your value and follow the things and opportunities that's set in front of you, you never know where it leads.
Julie, do you want to chime in on that too?
Sure. One of the trickiest things about boards is that saying that you have to be on one to get on one.
Mm.
So it's kind of a negative loop. So I have a lot of
Mhm.
empathy with people who are looking for your first board, and just the first message is just don't stop. Keep trying. It will happen. But I was fortunate. I was a sitting CEO, and I was in an anomalous industry for women. I ran a British company, a division in the U.S. of a British company that was heavy industry. But what happened, and this is one of the points that Betsy Berkemer-Crudar makes in her books, and that is networking. And the way my first board came about was a headhunter approached me to go on what was then the WellPoint board. But I knew her because I belonged to an organization that she belonged to. It was the LA trusteeship for the International Women's Federation. So that networking was really important. And she presented me to the CEO, and we had the way I described it to him later was we had a 4-hour argument in my first conversation with him. He was a very headstrong kind of person. But the message out of that was, I left it and I thought I'll never get chosen for that board because the guy was just so in my face. But apparently you had to be that way with this guy in order to, you couldn't be the shrinking violet. But he just made me mad. So I answered back the way I did. Anyway, that was the first board. We merged in 2004 with Anthem. So I stayed on that. And then that led to other boards.
Great. I love that message, though. I think that is a issue that comes up for a lot of women. They think, I'm not on a board, so how do I get on one? And you don't get on one unless you're on one. So it is that vicious loop, and just to keep trying is a great message for everybody. Esther?
Yes, thank you, Heather. Happy to chime in. Well, first, I want to congratulate 30 conversations and today's closing global, I'll repeat, global celebration is phenomenal. So in my role as the CEO of the Latino Corporate Directors Association, we work directly with Latino and Latina aspiring directors on their journey to the boardroom with some not just tips, but some practical advice and coaching. So, certainly we heard some of that here. Know your value, practice your pitch in conversation with peers, because 80% of the time or more, you're going to get on your first board through your network and people who have seen you in action. But also don't take it for granted for them to come to you. Have conversations, and have a conversation where you can ask questions. Certainly tell them, look, I'm interested in a board and this is why, and your value proposition, but then also ask, hey, there's a lot going on with activist investors. There's a lot going on with just the amount of work on boards. Tell me about it, because what you want is for that director or that colleague that you're talking to remember, and the next time they're approached about a board opportunity, they can say, you know what, I had a great conversation with Heather. You should talk to her. So this and what some of the panelists said today, great advice. I'm happy to share.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that's perfect. I mean, it's about what Veda said too, showing up, making sure you're always prepared. I think Anna drove that point home too. And so I think that's really great advice for everybody. I'm going to dive into our questions from the audience. So this question is from Tara in Los Angeles. How did you know board service was right for you and it was something you wanted to pursue or continue to pursue?
I like to take that. I love board work, and I am so thrilled to do it every day. I love the lively conversations amongst my peers. I love the fact that I've been a CEO and you feel like there's the weight of the world on your shoulders. Having a boardroom where I don't have to know it all, but I can lean in on the expertise of my fellow board members. I'm learning all the time. I think board service also allows you to glimpse. I mean, I didn't come from financial services industry, but I can talk banking now, and just being able to kind of learn about new industries at these levels is so fascinating and so invigorating to me. And, you learn that your skills are actually very applicable across different industries, right? We might face different challenges, but competition is competition, innovation, all of these things. There's a lot more crossover than we think. But the biggest reason I love board service, you can see I get very passionate about this, is I don't have to execute a thing.
Mhm.
I love thinking strategically. I love being able to wrestle with big questions, and long-term thinking, and long-term visions, and really talk strategy and about where the company is going and all of those things, that perhaps as a CEO, I think if anybody's been in that position, you know that you're a lot of times so much bogged down by the results of this next month, next quarter, head down as opposed to head up, and being having the opportunity as a board member to work on the organization as opposed to working in the organization. I love it.
Can I just jump in on what Anna said? First
Please.
of all, the easy soundbite for me is the best gig I ever had. In the sense that, from what you said, Anna, working with colleagues, stretching yourself, part of the drive for me to be on a board was being a striving human that I think all of us are. It was the epitome. It was the place to go after you've been a CEO. But to your point, to not have line responsibilities, I tell friends who've never been on a board that it's kind of like being a grandmother, because I just became a grandmother. You show up every 6 weeks, you tell them everything you know, you give them all your wisdom and experience, you leave and you come back 6 weeks later and you say, tell me what you did.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
no,
it's a great analogy.
I was going to say, I love what both Julie and Anna said. And, you know, there is a lot, ample talent, women of color for the boardroom. And in many ways, our executives, our top executives that are on the front lines today have so much to offer because there's so much dynamism in business. So know that you bring a lot of value, and bringing that to the boardroom in a way that you can be authentic and contribute. I think that boards are now looking for a broader scope of skill sets and newer skill sets. In fact, I was just on a call and they said, you know what, we want to find someone for the board that's in the mid 40s or, early 40s. So that is really exciting for a lot of people watching today. So keep it up.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add, you're more experienced than you think, and your expertise is more applicable than you think. I think that's the point that Anna was making too, but I also want to be sobering in the fact that it is about 230 hours of work a year per board, depending upon which industry, which company you're in. So it is not a light obligation. Previously, when it was more of a seen as a rubber stamp or friends of the CEO, things happen quickly, or after a golf outing, et cetera, that world has changed because in many ways, companies are seen as the new governments. They're the new regulators. They're the new purveyors of what's new and what's interesting and what's cutting edge. And then consumers have expectations of companies to take positions on issues that companies previously used to shun. So I want to say, inventory yourself about if you're ready for that, if your current responsibilities also allow for that. Again, about 230 hours a year, roughly, is kind of the average, is depending upon the industry and company. But those are the things that you just need to be ready for.
Can I just say, I'm so glad you added that.
Mhm.
This is not something
Agreed.
to take lightly. And I'll just mention, if any of you are familiar with the Edelman study, the trust
Mm.
indicator,
Mhm.
they just recently said that amongst corporations, governments, and religion, corporations are now trusted most.
Mhm.
So that level of responsibility now for leadership and the perspective that we're not simply fiduciaries of the company, but we have a broader stakeholder base, finally is happening. And I welcome that.
Yeah, those are all great points. Thank you for sharing that. I think someone too said on another conversation, I can't remember which city it was at the moment, but it was about making sure that you're doing it for the right reasons, which I think you've all stated too. Not about status, but really be intentional about why you're choosing that board. And that kind of bleeds into this next question. The question is, I'm serving on a nonprofit board and most of the board members do not feel connected to the organization or that they're providing value. Should I move on and search for another opportunity? And what's the best exit strategy? I think that could apply to not only nonprofit, but also advisory and corporate boards. What if it isn't the right fit? What if it doesn't align with your values? What is the right exit strategy?
Well, I'll jump in real quickly. I used to say to women, you have to be really careful the board you pick, because to leave at the minimum 3 years is difficult. If it's public, it has to be reported. There may be questions about why you left and all of that. So you really have to understand that it's a responsibility. If there's something that you don't believe in ethically, that's a different situation. Then you have a different responsibility. But that goes to your homework in advance. And as you said, Heather, not taking that board just because it's your first board, it can be tricky. But the thing for me, if you're asking this for a nonprofit board, if you don't have a passion for that, you're not being used up well. You should go where your passion is.
Here. I can't add any more to that. Great comments, Julie.
Thank you.
Well, I sit on and I chair that nonprofit board, and it was one of those things that we had to, as a board, decide and make some changes. Actually, when I became chair, so for this person asking the question, is there an opportunity to step up? If you're feeling that way, are your fellow board members feeling that way? And maybe it's time to just shake things up. Maybe instead of just listening to reports, you need to be shifting the topics that you guys are talking about. And so that was one of the changes that we did in CMTC, where it used to be just kind of CEO reporting, CFO reporting, financials, and you're just kind of sitting through what we call the parade of reports. We now make sure that we limit that to some degree, or that the reporting is really more engaging. It's about questions and making sure we truly are harvesting the knowledge, expertise, passion of all of our board members. We all give our time very generously, frankly, out of very, very busy schedules. And we're there to want to make a difference. And I think it's kind of a little bit incumbent on both the chair and the CEO and the organization itself to make sure, if you're asking people to step up, especially in a nonprofit, or to give their time, that you respect and honor that time is used wisely. And I think you want to harvest and you want to pull out all the talent that's around the table. And they aren't there just to Vada's point, board has evolved. We're not there just for governance anymore. You really want to utilize their expertise and bring external value onto the organization. So that's the first thing I would really say is there an opportunity to step up here? And of course, if not, then everything that my fellow panelist here has said certainly does apply. But I always want to say, before you give it up, is there something you can do to change the status quo?
And I completely agree, especially on all boards, but nonprofit boards, board evaluations, and just being honest and transparent, and sometimes even that if that has to be anonymous, so that there's real input and real feedback. Because with what I don't want to repeat what everyone said, it is so important. Boards don't, and individuals don't want to be a rubber stamp. You have such talent around that boardroom, and it becomes a waste. The other thing is, if someone leaves, and this is more for a nonprofit, because I agree with Julie, in a for-profit, it's a whole different scenario. If you leave too soon, there's just a bigger set of consequences and considerations. But for nonprofits, exit interviews are so important. Certainly for even executives that leave a nonprofit, for the board to know why they're exiting. And if you're on a board and you see that someone's exited, do an exit interview. The more transparency, honesty, and conversation there is, the more that at the end of the day, the response that board exists for a fiduciary reason. And if the either organization, the way it's structured, is not allowing that board to function as it should, to be the fiduciary for those who give nonprofit funds, it is something that really needs to be called out and addressed. It's not just a minor matter. It's important.
Yeah.
Heather, I think we're beginning to see a professionalization of nonprofit boards that are actually adopting policies similar to what corporates have. They're using gap accounting. They're using enterprise risk management. So I would say, as Julie mentioned, and Anna and other colleagues as well, in the front part of your selection of your board, try to pick a board that does have those, shall we say, parallel processes or professionalization, so that it will help you to that next move to a corporate board. You already understand what those processes are.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I love that, because that is initially the first step for most women, right? A nonprofit board. So it is important to choose that board that does emulate what's happening on corporate boards. So you get that. I love that. That's a great point. Sahar asked, how much experience does one need to be on a board? I know that's a open-ended question. It can be interpreted in a number of different ways, but I know there's also been more opportunity for women and people of color, and actually everybody who has experience in different areas that previously weren't required for boards, and they're looking beyond the C-suite. So maybe you guys can speak to that just for a little bit.
I'll take a shot at this on one thing. I've had a lot of women friends ask me about going on a board. And I said, let me ask you this. Do you know the language of business? Because business has its own language, and you have to be financially literate. So I wouldn't say certain jobs. I mean, it used to be just the sitting CEO. That was the one best model. Fortunately, we've broadened that. But no matter where you are in your career, being financially literate is important. You're going to be asked to be a fiduciary. You're going to need to be able to read a balance sheet. You're going to have to understand the metrics that business uses and what the messages of that are. So I'd say that's table stakes. And then the other things that you add on top of that make you attractive.
Great point.
You know, the only thing I want to add, not directly to that question, but Heather, this conversation is, look, we have never been at 26% of the Russell 3000 board seats held by women. That is phenomenal. But as women, we also can't stand to have any of our groups or individuals left behind. So I have to call out the very, very low number of Latinas on boards. They are being left behind. Latinas are invisible in the boardroom. They hold less than 1% of Russell 3000 board seats and only 1% of Fortune 1000 board seats. And yet, Latinas among all women are 20%. They're 2 in 10 women in this country and contributing in so many different ways, driving business formation and in driving growth in corporate America. So I think as women, let's look out for our Latinas and bring them along, as well as Latinas. We have an opportunity. I know you're preparing yourself, put yourself out there. We just cannot stand to have our biggest group of women of color, Latinas, being left behind.
Yes, that's true. I mean, I think it rings true for all people of color. The numbers are really low, and it's based right now on people who self-report, and it's difficult to analyze that analysis, but we do know that that's the case. And oftentimes I think that Latinas especially get stuck in, and Latin men and women get stuck in middle management roles, and sometimes hard to get out of that position or be seen as something different. And you're right. As women, we all have to help each other and elevate each other so we can move forward. There's another question here. How rigorous is the evaluation process for joining a public company board?
Yeah, it is, Heather, is about as rigorous as I have ever encountered. Particularly depending upon the sector. If you're in a regulated sector like financial sector, it's going to be very rigorous. I was also a candidate at one point for it wasn't even a casino. It was actually a supplier to casino. The application was 100 pages, and because they wanted to know who I owed money to and what my family and cousins, and it was more involved than anything I'd ever filled out. So that might be at the extreme end, but at the same time, you have to expect a background check. You probably want to self-disclose any issues that could emerge. Right now, as you know, we're in the internet age, and anything can be found out just about anyone. But it is a rigorous process, and particularly if there are issues that arise that deal with any financial improprieties or anything along that line, you probably want to either let some time pass or think about something else rather than the corporate board, because that's going to be tough to get through that eye of that needle.
Great point.
I just want to second that. Having been on a big health insurer and now on a mutual fund board, both highly regulated, but I didn't know regulation until I went on a medical marijuana cannabis board startup. I mean, just so you know, it's really regulated,
Mhm.
really regulated. And the paperwork, and there's a lot of discovery. To go to Vada's point, you don't want to hide anything in this because it will be discovered. I was on a slate of directors from Broadcom wanting to take over Qualcomm, and they did a very, very deep background check on that. So much so, okay, I'm going to just say this. I got a phone call from somebody at Mintz who was doing the study, and she said, "Let me ask you this: were you ever a call girl?" I said, "No, I can definitively tell you that it's not true." And she said,
There's
"Well, there's
another
someone
Julie
who
Hill.
used your name in Santa Ana." So the point is, they will discover whatever's out there.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, it wasn't me.
Yeah, you may want to also kind of scrub your social media too before
Yeah.
you begin to think about this. Yeah, I luckily a lot of my college days were pre Facebook and Twitter, so I'm thankful for that. But at the same time, it would be good to make sure that your social media and your front facing is something that's going to appeal to a board, or it's not going to be an embarrassing aspect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think everybody hopefully knows that by now, but some people have learned that the hard way, even in, upper level management positions, and have been called out. And it's really important to be mindful of what you're posting and how you're sharing information, but also back to the point of being prepared, that's your preparedness right there. Use that as a tool for yourself, even at a young age, to remind yourself that those conversations become public. And you shouldn't be having them online. You should really save that for something else. And also, it tells a lot about someone's character too. If those are the type of things that you're wanting to post or needing to post, then, usually those things somehow find their way and cross over. So I think the integrity of a person really does live online these days.
Heather, if I may add
Yes.
to that,
Yeah.
I think to everybody's point, boards is a little bit of a culmination of your whole career and your reputation and your integrity throughout your whole career. And frankly, any dings along the way will show up, to everybody's point. But I think for me, and I think all my fellow board members, you no longer represent yourself, right? Any blemish on your judgment, character, history, even if it has nothing to do with business, frankly, can reflect on the broader organization. And I think that's it's a daunting responsibility that I don't know if people really think about, because some news comes out on one of the board members, it literally could affect the reputation of the company, the board itself. It could affect jobs. It could affect the stock prices. It really has ramifications that cannot be, you sometimes just can't anticipate. And so realizing that you no longer are representing yourself, but you are the example that people can put up and speak to, representing the organization as a whole. And I think the second part of this conversation, the question is, how rigorous is the process? But to a large degree, I think people don't realize it's not about the rigor of the process. I think the key question is, how do you know you're the right fit for the board? And a lot of times there's boards, if the culture, if the fit is not correct, it's better to walk away. And so this isn't just about, I'm going to take the first opportunity that comes along and kind of write it out and see what happens. I think anybody would tell you there is no greater challenge than making sure that it's a right fit for yourself and for the rest of the board and for the organization and all of those things. And that is because of what I just spoke about. You no longer are representing yourself. You're really representing a part of a bigger mission.
Yeah, your brand is the persona, right? And I think that speaks volumes. I wanted to ask you too, based on your response, Anna, is beyond the rigorous portion of the process, getting to know the culture, outside of getting to know that culture of the board from an online perspective, are there things that women and men can do to understand what that culture is like? Are there requests that they can make? Can you join a meeting? Can you, what does that process look like, so that you really understand that it is the right fit for you? For people that don't know in the audience, I think it's something that we could probably dive into?
Yeah, for anybody who has an opportunity to be invited to the process,
Yeah.
I think, and especially if it's your first board, I think one of the biggest tips that was really enlightening for me is that, remember, we've all had interviews for a job. Okay, but this is really, really different. This is applying, and as you're interviewing, you're actually interviewing with your peers, right? These are going to be other board members that are going to sit around the table with you. So you've got to be able to hold your own. You have to ask yourself, not is this a boss I can report to, but are these people I want to make really big decisions with? Are these people that I can bring value to at a discussion around the table? Can we think about things and work together in a way that brings value out of everybody, and it is the right fit for me, and all of those things? I think if you have that mindset going in, then you will hold your own and be able to truly kind of assess the situation for what it is.
From a technical basis, once you're in the process, you have every right to ask for information about outstanding lawsuits. You can ask to see clean audit reports so that you understand. You can read online. What matters to me is, with all of the talk now on ESG, is this a company that potentially could greenwash a number of subjects? Read their statement. If they don't have a separate sustainability statement, you can ask why. And to what Anna is saying, these are value-based relationships, and you have to understand what the values, both of the company, as publicly stated, but also in asking some probing questions of the interviewers. Typically, it will be 2 or 3 board members, and ask them what the tough decisions they've made recently, what those decisions were, how did they process that, how do they think about those things. Once you're into the process and you're a candidate, you get to do your own due diligence.
I think in terms of preparation too for this journey that you're about to go, even before you get into an interview process, if you're in a current position at a company and your boss regularly presents to the board, see if there's an occasion you can accompany your boss to the board presentation to get a feel for what the give and take is like in those discussions, how that presentation goes, and make that a regular cadence. I think it's a great way for you to understand how board dynamics work, what kind of questions are asked, what kind of probe, kind of the shall we say, the concentrated nature of those presentations. Usually they're within 10 to 15 minutes or sometimes longer, depending upon the subject. So I think that's a great way as well. Also, separating from a publicly traded board, another great way, in addition to a nonprofit board that you might want to think about, some of these private equity companies have about 100, 200 portfolio companies, companies within their portfolios. That actually could also be a great first board step, although many of those boards are populated by the partners that are on those private equity firms, but they also are looking now greater for independence reasons, as Anna and Julie and Esther have talked about, because they want some outside perspective, because their goal is to hold that company for 5 years and exit it profitably. So that's another thing that we often overlook and don't think about, is private equity boards as a first leap to a publicly traded board.
Particularly if you have expertise in that, whatever that company is doing.
Yeah, and I actually, thanks for bringing that up, Veda. We work with a lot of private equity from Carlyle, TPG, KKR, and others. And look, there's a battle for talent. And in our case, they approached us because they said, wow, this is the largest network of accomplished and respected Latinos in business, corporate leadership, et cetera. You all are not connected to us. And so the interesting thing there, we've had lots of sessions on it, is that it's a very different experience and expectations in terms of working and serving on a publicly traded versus a private, especially private equity held company board. Because in a private or PE portfolio company, they're looking for individuals that are going to come in and somewhat roll up their sleeves, advise the CEO and advise the strategy. In fact, if you're an executive and you love that, I highly recommend, if that's an avenue that's open to you, a private equity or private company board, because oftentimes you've been in the in the front lines and you have a lot to contribute. When you go on a publicly traded, we hear the phrase, hands out, nose in.
Mm.
You're more, you're advising on some very big decisions, but it's not as much of the rolling up your sleeve strategy. So great comment and great opportunities that really help you bring in that deep industry, especially the industry expertise, but any P&L and that expertise is highly needed in those scenarios as well.
Agreed. Yeah, we talk about that a lot in our workshops too. It's not just about public; it's also about private and VCs, and making sure that that's an opportunity that you're pursuing as well. Because it's just as it's just as valuable to your experience, and also you might find that you just like it there, and don't want to serve on a corporate board. We don't have a lot of time left, so I do want to get to this one question. The question is, are boards having diversity and inclusion conversations that include supporting working families who must care for children or individuals who must care for a loved one due to COVID? I think there's a lot of conversation right now about the inequity that women are facing since COVID-19 and the dual roles that we're playing, not only at home, working from home, but also trying to maintain our families or other loved ones that we're caring for. And I just think it's important to try and understand what conversations are happening within the boardroom that would help affect that.
That's the silver lining, I think, of COVID, is that we have understood more about about our workers as whole people and the responsibilities that we have. And I'm happy to say that the boards that I'm on are enlightened in that way. They understand. I mean, my bias is that this has disadvantaged working moms probably more than anybody else trying to juggle this, because our society still is set up that way. So to have an enlightened CEO who understands that and understands it's not just being a mom and it's not just being a woman, but everybody has fuller responsibilities in life. And I do see that coming out. That's the S in ESG. It's probably been the least talked about, but as I say, COVID has accelerated the conversation for good.
Yeah, Heather, I have a 13 or 15-year-old. I'm still a working mom. And those are conversations we absolutely do have in the boardroom. I think to Julie's point, everybody's a little more enlightened about the issue. I think if anything, this past 2 years, I've said this a lot, especially in the early days of the crisis, the souls of organizations came out.
Yeah.
How did you treat your employees? How did you treat your vendors? How did you treat your partners? What was your role during this international global crisis as the whole world is navigating into the unknown? And, every board had to wrestle with really tough decisions. And those were not financial decisions purely. They really had a lot to do with what is the right thing to do, by our constituents, by our shareholders, by our employees, by all of these things. And this idea that I sometimes think that the board is really the guardian of the soul of the company. And we need to protect that. And we are, in fact, kind of the gatekeepers to making sure all the time. And that is our job, right? Governance number one. Are we doing the right thing by everybody as much as we can, right? And there's always give and take. These are not easy decisions. By the time it reaches the boardroom, if it was black and white and it was easy, it would have been taken care of, right? And so that's, again, back to we have to have the comfortable ability to lean into uncomfortable conversations. And
I completely agree. I mean, look, we stepped into everyone's, office, living room, kitchen. Where, in the past, you put on your, company suit, went in, and people didn't see your full life. I think this is really elevated, really bringing more. I mean, we talk about bringing your authentic self. I mean, how much more can it get with, real backgrounds that are part of your life? That's huge. There's so much that is and continues to be devastating with this prolonged pandemic in terms of affecting people's lives and livelihood. But there's so much lessons. I think we're still evaluating all of it, but absolutely, I think and right before this hit, there was a big conversation about corporate culture and corporate culture with coming as a key topic in the boardroom. In the past, it was, the CEO that was the chief of corporate culture. But when we saw things, remember, around Me Too and so many things that really brought down whole companies because the culture was not what it needed to be.
Mhm.
So we were starting to have those conversations. And then when the pandemic hit, everything kind of accelerated, just like so much else, right? The technology adoption, the so many broader issues that came into the boardroom more than ever before. So, I think with all the directors we work with, and clearly what we heard in these 20 conversations is that, in many ways, it has forced us to have these conversations that were ignored for too long. So,
Mhm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, it goes back to Julie's point too about the companies and corporations being the real key stakeholders for individuals. And so how are you going to mirror that and make sure that people are trusting you and what you're offering and how you're serving people and how you're treating people and how you're providing your employees a way to, advance and be flexible with that, because there's so many different key factors that came out of COVID that I think affected everyone.
I remember listening, just one quick thought
Yeah,
here.
yeah, of course.
Listening to a panel once, and one of the women on the panel said, business can do better.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that just kind of summed up all of these movements. And this is such an opportunity for business to do better.
Agreed. Yeah, those are great points. Before we go, I just wanted to ask each of you, because we are running out of time, if you could leave our audience with one thing, what would you leave them with?
Well, I'll just start here. So one word that came up, I know, in a number of different panels in different cities is about being intentional. And I think that's a reciprocal statement. Being intentional, meaning that people like me who serve as chairs of governance and nominating committee, and I intentionally sought that role and fought for that role because I wanted the obligation and fulfill the obligation of putting people of color as well as women on boards. And I've been able to fulfill that both on the Ashland board and the Valvoline board. Very pleased that one of my nominees now is on the Tesla board. And also, in this new book by Gloria Feld, Intentioning, which is the title of the book, I'm really pleased to be mentioned in there as one of the people that she regards as someone that's been an intentional partner on this journey of helping women achieve gender parity and 50-50 women on boards, and also fulfill their human potential with regard to professional success. So intentionality, I think we can all practice that from whatever perspective we're in, and something I will continue to keep doing. So great to be here today.
Can I just add a corollary to that is one of the things I say to women frequently is say yes at the door. And I think that's because women edit themselves. If you look at headhunter statistics, if there are 10 points on a job description, typically men will apply if they have 3 or 4. Women judge themselves much with greater concern. They'll go for 10. They have to have 10 out of 10. But if you think you're qualified, if you've done your due diligence, and yet you're still kind of worried about, am I good enough? Just say yes.
Agreed.
On the heels of that, I completely agree. And knowing that you have to break down the experiences too, because many times Latinas aren't even getting the job description. They're not getting, the opportunities. So back to, let's make sure that we are bringing everyone to the table. In fact, there's that other saying that says that if you're not at the table, you're lunch. Well, Latinas are not even on the menu, and they're having a hard time getting on the elevator. So it's a call out that there's just so much more. We've made some great progress and there's more to do, but I have a lot of faith that all of us working together are going to get there.
Well, I love what everybody said. I think a way to wrap up this whole global conversation, for me, I think it needs to be said that this is a win-win proposition, and that the way we approach this has to be a win-win for everybody. This is not about taking something away from a particular group or taking away from something that's happening, but it's really about how can we add value collectively to the broader conversation, to our effectiveness in the boardroom, to envisioning what the role of business can be for our society, for community. And one of my favorite sayings of all times is Clay Christensen saying, management practiced well is the noblest of professions, right? And in the boardroom, we have an opportunity to do that. We are the providers of jobs. We're the guideline for the world in so many ways, right? Without economically backbone, nothing runs. And so there's a crucial, we're kind of in the center of everything. And this is a conversation about how we move everything up, from work balance to shareholders' returns and economy. I can't think of any topic that doesn't kind of all intersect at this place. And so this isn't about win-lose. We have to keep the conversation and keep promoting that this is a win-win situation. When we all do better, everybody gets better.
Bravo. I love that.
Yay.
Yay. Thank you
I
so
love
much.
that, Anna. Thank you.
Yes, that was great. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your experiences and expertise today with us. We've made some great headway this year, but we definitely are not done yet. So we appreciate you being part of the conversation and the panel today and joining us for this closing celebration as we finish these 30 events for 50/50 Women on Boards. Thank you so much.
Who's got the kazoos, Heather? Are we celebrating
I know.
here?
I mean, yeah, we have to celebrate. So we've got, maybe you can sing for us.
Oh, yeah. That's
And we should just say good luck to everybody who's
Yes.
absolutely.
and
Yes.
just keep going and have confidence in yourself. And it's a journey.
And thanks for everyone. I mean, this was successful because of all of the attendees. So everyone who joined in any of the cities across the nation, you made it happen. And clearly, Betsy and the dynamic 50/50 Women on Boards team, you all are amazing. So just such inspiration, and let's keep it going.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that. Thank you for everyone attending today, and thank you for your participation and engagement throughout the panel and our city-state events. I'd now like to welcome Betsy back.
Hey, great job, Heather. Just great. And thanks to Julie, Anna, Veda,
Yes.
and Esther. What a great way to close out our 2021 conversation series. So another huge round of applause, please, for our audience and our event chairs and co-chairs and our headquarters team. We're so inspired by all of you, and it makes this our job is so important, the impact that we're having, but it makes it also fun to do with all of you. So I'd like to remind everybody that at 50/50 Women on Boards, we focus on 4 brand pillars of service. Number 1, we educate women, including women of color, on how to pursue a board position. We advocate for gender balance and diversity on boards through our public awareness campaigns and events. We collaborate with like-minded organizations and corporations to advance the movement at a much quicker rate. And 4, we report on the progress. We track the progress with our research and keep track of the progress that women and people of color are making to advance to boards. Heather.
And for those of you who want to begin your path to the boardroom or are ready to pursue a board position, we have 2 workshops remaining in December for early and mid-career women called Path to the Boardroom. That's on December 14th. And for our senior level executives, we have Get on Board, which has a few seats remaining. So go and sign up for the week of December 6th. In those courses, we teach the fundamentals of the tools that you need to really pursue a board seat, which is learn what skills and experiences boards need, identify your value-add experience that we talked about a little bit today, enhance your digital profiles with targeted skills, and make sure that you maintain those profiles so when people are searching for you, the opportunity becomes available, engage in strategic networking, and earn recognition for your expertise.
Definitely. And for those of you in corporations who are working diligently to accelerate diversity on corporate boards, we recommend the following. Be intentional, as Veda said. Number 1, partner with organizations that elevate people of color and underrepresented groups. And 2, encourage talent mobility and upward mobility so employees can transition into leadership positions. Number 3, utilize board renewal and term limits and retirements to meet your company's needs and make room for others on the board. 4, be intentional, our favorite word, about building an inclusive workplace culture where individuals can share ideas and concerns openly. And lastly, measure your progress, just like we do. What gets measured gets done. And welcome honest feedback, if you will. So please sign up also for our newsletter, our quarterly newsletter, receive our reports, our event information, get involved, and keep us posted on your progress. Thank you all for supporting 50/50 Women on Boards. And thank you, Heather. Your
Thank you, Betsy.
It's been fantastic. I'd like to pop champagne right now, but we're still in the middle of a work day. So we must say happy holidays and thanks for being here.
Thank you, everyone. We look forward to connecting with you soon.
And we'll see you next year.
Yes.
For sure.